Lenovo has offered the Legion 5 series and the Legion 7 series as a gaming offering for many years now. In 2023, Lenovo has now introduced what we're calling the Lenovo Legion 9i. So this will now sit at the top of their stack for their gaming laptop offering. This one here promises a forged carbon lid, so this is pretty fantastic to look at and touch. It also boasts a 1200 nits bright Mini-LED True HDR display that is capable of 100% Adobe RGB coverage. Now, if you don't know what that means, that sits even above 100% DCI-P3 color coverage, because this means you can do gaming, entertainment, as well as content creator workloads. You can do photo editing and video editing on here with ease, and you'll have perfect color when you're doing so. Plus, it's 3 milliseconds at 165 Hz. It gives you all of the bells and whistles you need for a gaming display. Also within this laptop, new is that there is sealed liquid coolant in the cooling solution and the heat pipes for this particular device. Since this is a thin and light device and it is the premium of the premium offering from Lenovo, we'll take a look at whether or not that actually translates to actual performance, better thermals, and better overall cooling, and lower fan noise perhaps. It should. However, sealed liquid coolant means there may be other issues on board here, as it's already been tested by Dave 2D and others on YouTube. So I'll be taking a look at that in a separate dedicated video. So stay tuned for that on my particular channel, and we'll get into it and look at all of this here. Now, the price for this unit is not cheap, as equipped with an RTX 4090 and 32 gigs of DDR5 RAM, not the overclocked DDR5 6400, which is on offer now. It was a $6,000 Canadian price tag. So ultimately, we'll look at the value proposition of this laptop and see whether or not a $6,000 laptop purchase is warranted in 2023, even if it is such a unique offering. The brand new Lenovo Legion 9i for 2023 includes an i9-13908X CPU with 24 cores and 32 threads, but the most notable here is that 16-inch 3200 by 2165 Hz, 16 by 10, 3 milliseconds, 1200 nits, 100% Adobe RGB Mini-LED display, and the RTX 4090 16 gigabytes at 175 watts max TDP with 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, Wi-Fi 7, and Bluetooth 5.3. This is a stunning combination, and with a 99 watt-hour battery and a relatively light 2.56 kilograms, or just a little over 5.5 pounds, we're looking at an amazing combination here. So let's jump in here and we'll look at some of the additional components of this device before looking at the CPU performance benchmarks and the gaming performance before considering the overall value proposition of this $6,000 laptop. The backlight bleed test on this display seemed to be very, very impressive. As you can see here at ISO 1000, I'm not seeing any backlight bleed whatsoever around the display. This is with max brightness engaged. And if we switch here over to ISO 10,000, I had to crank it all the way up in order for it to show any semblance of backlight bleed whatsoever. But as you can see here, that this display, because of the 1576 zones and the Mini-LED backlight, is excellent in backlight bleed tests. One other complaint I've had about Lenovo Legion devices in the past is the lack of uniformity in the brightness when you adjust the display. That is not present here. Due to those 1536 zones and that Mini-LED backlight, the brightness is uniform all the way from 0% all the way up to 100% with 10 points of adjustness, and is an excellent show. And the display is so good that it warrants revisiting the specs. And if we look at the official sheet that's provided by Lenovo, we've got a 16-inch 3.2K display. That's a 3200 by 2000 resolution Mini-LED backlit 1200 nits display. It's an anti-glare surface with a 16 by 10 aspect ratio, and what's most impressive is that 1,000,000:1 contrast ratio, akin to what you would see with OLEDs. Of course, OLED is always mentioned as infinite contrast ratio, but here we have 1,000,000:1, which is literally thousands of fold over an IPS or even a VA display. A typical IPS, for example, would be 1,000:1 or 1,200:1, in best case scenario, whereas a VA would top out at 3, 4, maybe 5,000:1 contrast ratio. So this is really giving you those true blacks. And if we continue here, the color gamut coverage, 100% DCI-P3 coverage, as well as 100% Adobe RGB coverage and 100% sRGB coverage. You cannot ask for more in terms of a display that covers all of the RGB gamuts and other color gamuts, including the 165 Hz refresh rate, and we've got Dolby Vision support, Display HDR 1000, even though we're 1200 nits there, it's certified for Display HDR 1000. We've got NVIDIA G-Sync on board with Advanced Optimus, low blue light stuff, which is pretty typical now of many displays, and we've got the 1536 zone Mini-LED backlight, which makes this a star of the show. One other thing to say about the display on this device here, and generally it's not something that I need to cover in terms of displays, but because this is a mini LED display with 1536 zones, which means 6 per zone, 6 LEDs per zone. That means we've got literally thousands of mini LEDs in this backlight display here. So that means the cover of this device actually gets quite warm if you've been using the device for a while, particularly when it's plugged in, because you need that in order to get the full 165 Hz and to get the HDR functioning on this particular device. So that said, we're just going to do some temperatures here, and I'll show you what I mean in terms of the actual temperatures. The back of this device is not exactly hot in terms of it's going to burn anything, but it's also not a cool device like you would have generally on a typical laptop. So you can see here that the display itself gets quite warm because this is generally where the electrical connections are. So you can see here we're hitting about 43 degrees on the actual display, and thus the metal top lid of this particular device. So just something to take note of so that it doesn't surprise you. Hopefully we registered there somewhere 45 degrees as a max temperature on this particular lid, but it is what it is, and that's the price you pay for a mini LED backlit display. One other thing you'll need to keep track of is because you have 3200 by 2000 as the native resolution of this display, you really cannot use it with 100% scaling. You will need to use window scaling at either 150% or even higher to get a more usable daily working resolution. And one critical spec which seems to be omitted for some reason from even Lenovo's official spec sheet is that this is actually a 10-bit color depth display. This is the only way that you can have not only 100% DCI-P3 coverage, but also 100% Adobe RGB coverage. So just wanted to point that out here. And if you look at the peak brightness here, Windows correctly recognizes this at a 1207 nits display. And the refresh rate gives you an option between 165 Hz and 60 Hz. When you unplug the device or if you're on battery, it automatically toggles back to 60 Hz, and the use HDR option that you have in display settings is automatically disabled. All right, all the specs aside, what do I have to say about this particular display? Well, I don't know if you can see it on the screen here, but the highlights are very bright. The shadows are excellent. There's lots of depth and detail in the shadows, and the colors literally just pop. You know, shy of being OLED, this I think is the next best display on any laptop, period. And I stand by that statement. I've looked at all of the 18 inches that are new for this year. They have some of the IPS displays. I've also looked at the Acer Predator Helios 618, which also has a mini LED display, but this display puts all of those to shame. The brightness level at 1200 nits, fast response rate. It's got NVIDIA G-Sync on board and FreeSync support. It has all of the Adobe 100% RGB color coverage. It's a 10-bit panel, so you get all of the best of the best. And at the end of the day, if you're looking for a top-class gaming experience and you want HDR, which a lot of games are now supporting, and it's a visual eye candy that you're really after because it's a PC master race thing after all, right? That's why we pay these big bucks for the PC gaming hardware and whatnot. Then this is a must-get display if you're looking for a laptop and budget is no option. If budget is constrained, you're going to have a lot of different other options to look at, and I think that's the big deciding factor here is when you're looking at how much you want to spend, that will ultimately determine whether or not this is the laptop for you. But I think this display, if I had a choice, this would be my first display of 2023, A+ in terms of everything overall, performance, brightness levels, the saturation, the color gamut. It's just an all-around outstanding display. And if you turn on HDR with this on Windows, enable HDR in the games that actually have true proper HDR support, such as Cyberpunk 2077, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, even though it's a little bit of an older game, and some of the newer games that are now releasing in this current year, in this holiday season, I think you're just going to be in for a real good treat. So that's all I really have to say about the display. I cannot fault it for anything other than maybe that the panel gets a little bit warm, but hey, that's the price we pay. Everything else gets hot on this panel, or on the device, so why not? Let's get the panel hot as well. But anyway, that's all I have to say about this one. So let's look at some of the gaming chops of this particular device. Alright, now to say a few words about the gaming performance of this laptop. So this game is Lies of P, just released last week, and I'm running here on this Lenovo Legion 9i. So let me just hop in, give you the actual graphics settings. Running at the native 3.2K by 2K resolution of this display. VSync off, and we've got DLSS set to quality mode with the highest graphical settings set to best and all of the other detail settings also set to best. Now with that, we're getting some smooth frame rates. So this is an actual 165 Hz display. Let's toggle on our performance figures. And we can see here that GPU is getting nearly 170 watts pushed to it, and the GPU is sitting at around 77 degrees. Of course, this is from It took a little break after testing, but you can see here that the GPU will hit close to 83 degrees once it's actually been running for quite a while. And those power figures, however, do maintain the 170 and 170 watts plus power performance figures on that particular GPU. That said, it gives you excellent performance. The GPU will sit right around 90 degrees, just slightly under sometimes. You may see a flash peak up to 100 degrees or so, but if you use the Lenovo balance profile with the Lenovo AI engine enabled, it will keep all of that stuff in check. So that said, here we're maxing out nearly the frame rates of this display at 160 frames per second. Now, undoubtedly, somebody will ask what happens if you disable DLSS, so I'll demonstrate that here as well. We'll go into our graphics settings and disable DLSS altogether. And now we can see here that we've gotten basically a halving of our frame rate, just about half. So we've got about 114, 115 frames per second at that 3K resolution, which is not bad at all, actually. And keep in mind that this is a new game that's running. Now, the interesting to note is this is between 1440p and 1600p, and on the other end, 4K resolution. So we've got a nice resolution midpoint here. We're getting really all of the sharpness and the clarity. And with this HDR display, we're getting an excellent gaming experience without having the taxing nature of the 4K and trying to push all those pixels. So we're still a few 100,000 or maybe a million pixels short of 4K. But that means we're actually getting some very, very good visual fidelity in terms of, and the gaming experience is excellent. So even without DLSS, we're getting about 100 frames per second easily, sometimes dips down to 90 or high 80s, depending on what's happening on screen. But I would say overall, a very, very good gaming experience. That liquid cooling solution that Lenovo has in here does seem to be doing its work. Plus that Lenovo AI engine, they keep tweaking it with further BIOS updates. It's just getting better and better. Eventually, we'd like to be to a point where we have these AI engines inside the laptop. We have no performance modes, no need for Lenovo Vantage, and the AI engine basically manages everything on the device based on the workload that you're running. So I think we'll get to that point soon enough in the future here, but this is a very impressive showing from this device, and I'm overall very, very satisfied with this device in terms of the gaming experience. Now, we'll jump in and have you look at some of the benchmarks and some of the other games that I tested on this particular laptop. As we look at the gaming benchmarks here with the 4090 equipped Legion 9i, we see a similar story. And of course, keep in mind the testing philosophy that was adopted for this test here is with the native resolution of 3200 by 2000. That is a 16 by 10 resolution display. And that is nearly its way to 4K, with 4K being 3840 by 2160, but not quite 4K. So it is much higher resolution than 1440p or even 1600p. But keep in mind that it still is in between that level and 4K resolution. Now, we know that the 4090 with its 16 gigabytes of VRAM and its high number of CUDA cores really excels when we have higher resolutions, has been demonstrated on many other channels. So I wanted to really test this by pushing it to its limits and try to run everything cranked on that native resolution of this display. Now, keep in mind that that display is gorgeous. We'll talk about it in that display section here, but we can see the trend. Every game pretty much lives somewhere between the mid 40s to mid 50s in terms of frame rates, with a few exceptions, and DLSS was enabled in all of these games. HDR was turned on wherever available. The highest preset for the quality was selected, and testing was done with Lenovo Vantage being set to performance mode so we could get the maximum performance out of this device, and fans were left to auto. There was no further tweaking or any playing with custom mode or any tweaking of any of the PL1s, PL2s, etc. That said, because we have advanced Optimus on board and we have a VRR display, an adaptive refresh rate display with full G-Sync support, it means we were getting excellent clarity, excellent sharpness, lovely HDR, proper HDR that was truly enjoyable to game on, and one of the brightest, most crisp, sharp, and color vivid displays that I've ever seen in my life on a laptop. This is an Adobe RGB 100% coverage display. That means not only is it good for gaming and movie watching, you can do all kinds of actual color accurate work on this display as well. So it is absolutely stunning. I would love to see this display make its way into many more devices. But that said, some of the older games were able to clear 60 FPS mark at the native resolution, but many games hovered in between the high 40s to mid to high 50s, which is still a very playable and enjoyable experience given the adaptive refresh rate display. Looking at the CPU offering in the Legion 9i, we're greeted with the 13980HX, which is at the top of the CPU stack for 13th generation Raptor Lake mobile lineup from Intel. That said, the 13980HX and the 13900HX trade blows in many benchmarks back and forth, with of course the 13980HX being the king of the hill here, and as it should be so. What is more important to note is the 13500H and the 13700 and the 900H and HK sit much lower in the performance stack. Considering these are 14 to 20 thread CPUs, 14 to 20 thread CPUs, you're going to see much lower performance, in many cases often half of what you would see from the competing HX series. Keep in mind the H series is 45 watt CPUs, whereas the HX is the 55 watt plus CPUs introduced new in 2023. As we can see here in Cinebench R23 multi-core, we are half the performance of the HX class of CPUs. So if you're looking for CPU heavy workloads, or if you have a demanding workload that you need to run on these laptops in a mobile environment, look at the HX CPUs that's also equipped in the Legion 9i. This Legion 9i is equipped with two Samsung 1TB PCIe Gen 4 NVMe SSDs in a RAID 0 array for a total of 2 TB of capacity. And that RAID 0 performance is absolutely fantastic. This basically flies through any of the benchmarks. So you can see here, the read speeds are astronomical, and it gets close to that theoretical limit of 14,000 megabytes per second. So game loading times are a breeze, and jumping in and around the operating system is actually quite fast as well. Keep in mind that this is just the configuration, one of the configurations that you can order when you're selecting your laptop. There's the default configuration offers a 1TB SSD. Maybe that's a Samsung device, maybe it's not. It's really hard to say without actually getting the device and testing it, because they don't generally provide that specific information. But happy to see a Samsung drive here and some fantastic read numbers. The Legion 9i does not disappoint in the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth department either. We've got MediaTek's Wi-Fi 7. Yes, that's Wi-Fi 7, the latest in the Wi-Fi standard in terms of wireless speeds, and we've got Bluetooth 5.3 on board as well. Now, this is one of the first Wi-Fi 7 devices I've come across, so it's very nice to see that. However, unless you have the infrastructure in your home or in your office, such as the Wi-Fi 7 routers or access points to take advantage of those speeds, it's at this point just a gimmick more than anything else. But nice to see that, you know, with Lenovo's premium top high-end device comes with top high-end specs and the hardware to boot. And that theme continues with 2.5 gigabit killer Ethernet gigabit connectivity on this particular device. That means we're going to have the fastest wired connectivity speeds if you want to have a more stable connection for those fraps and those fragging sessions. A 99 watt-hour battery provides the juice here for this particular laptop. We've also got super rapid charge on board, as Lenovo calls it, which means 30% capacity in 10 minutes and 70% in 30 minutes, which is just a little over half, or 80 minutes for a full charge of 100% capacity. Now, the mobile mark here says that 5.37 hours for battery life, but realistically, you're going to see about 4 to maybe 4.5 hours of battery life in mixed use scenarios. My testing has showed otherwise. Of course, the 8 hours, as you can see here, is listed at 1080p only playback with 150 nits of brightness. Not very realistic, so keep that in mind. And USB Type-C charging is also supported on this particular device at 140 watts using the two available USB Type-C Thunderbolt 4 ports. Keep in mind that in my particular configuration, a 140 watt USB Type-C slim adapter was provided. However, that's mentioned as optional and may not be included in your configuration. This is a test of the webcam that's built into the Lenovo Legion 9i. Lenovo states that this has been upgraded as well to an FHD 1080p 30 FPS webcam with an e-shutter on the right hand side of the device, toggling the switch like so. Disables the webcam picture, but you can still capture audio through the dual array onboard microphones that are on this device for a little bit clearer audio, and to perhaps drown out some of the background noise in the room and get clearer audio to your audience when you're actually capturing from this cam. Now, the picture looks pretty decent. It's a standard 1080p affair, as is common across many devices this year in 2023. Would you like to see these upgraded to 2K or even perhaps 4K webcam sensors in the next coming year, considering hybrid work is going to be a thing much longer into the future than anybody would have expected? So let me know what you think of the picture quality and the audio quality in the comments below from the device natively. Alright, so we'll do a quick 1-minute typing test here on the Legion 9i to see this position being shifted down a little bit further for the keyboard. Typically it's up a few inches or so, maybe another inch, inch and a half. So we'll see how this positioning changes the typing experience, and I'll let you listen to the typing sounds. We'll do about 30 seconds to a minute here of typing on this particular keyboard, and if I need to, I'll boost it in post so you guys can clearly hear what the tactility and the feedback is from this keyboard when you're typing on this particular device. So let's begin. So after completing that typing test, we can see here that I've got 99 words per minute, so I can get up to speed pretty quickly, but accuracy a little bit lower than I usually like. I'm at 89%. Usually I'm in the mid-90s, and that has to do with the fact that the keyboard is a little bit flatter than I'm used to on any of the other keyboards. So this versus the Lenovo Legion 7P or the 7 Pro or the 5 Pro even has less tactility, of course, because this is a thinner device. Thus, the keyboard keys cannot have that depth of travel. But that said, you can get up to speed pretty quickly on this laptop. Accuracy may need a little bit of work. Maybe I'm a bit rusty this morning, but generally speaking, 99 words per minute at about 90% accuracy is not a bad keyboard experience at all. The Legion 9i provides an excellent RGB experience with a wraparound light bar on the front, which reflects onto the table or the surface when the device is placed on it, giving a very nice and soft glow of RGB colors, full spectrum there. Plus, we've got a wraparound bar around the ports housing on the back of the device behind the LED display. A bit unfortunate that you can't see that during actual gaming or usage, but I guess that's actually an intended purpose. So a little bit of bling behind the scenes there. You've got that Legion logo that lights up on the display as well, fully RGB addressable through Lenovo Vantage, and you've got an excellent perky RGB keyboard with 6 levels of brightness and endless customization options in Lenovo Vantage. And just quickly to touch on the trackpad here, so we can basically wrap up the input segment of this particular device. So the keyboard, it's got excellent RGB, it's got good tactility. It takes a little bit of getting used to because it's a little bit flat initially, but it seems like the keys start to break in once you do that. Looking a little bit further down to the trackpad here, we've got a much smaller trackpad than what we're used to seeing now in newest devices. They're coming with larger and larger trackpads. This here is a little bit of a throwback to the ancient times of maybe 10 years ago, where it's got a squished and an elongated trackpad. Understandable though, because the keyboard has been pushed further down to allow for more headroom here for cooling and heat pipes and water cooling and that sort of thing. So it is a very good trackpad though. There's no issues with actually doing multitask gestures on here. It navigates quite well, and there's never been any accidental misses. There is an option to do function F10, which will disable the keyboard or the trackpad altogether, so you're not getting any accidental misses or accidental touches when you're in the game, so you're not going to accidentally alt tab out by accident. So if you don't want to use the keyboard shortcut, you can also go into Lenovo Vantage, and there's a touchpad lock that will do essentially the same thing. So that's a nice feature to have. This does have a glass touchpad surface, and it has Windows Precision drivers, so nothing really to complain about other than, of course, the size, but that's understandable given the layout of this particular keyboard deck. And to make an honorable mention here about the speakers, I usually don't talk about the speakers in my laptop reviews because, well, a sack of potatoes potentially sounds better. But in this particular case, akin to these speakers, what I've seen is, if you look at the Razer Blade series, they have THX tuned speakers, particularly the Razer Blade 16 and the 18, and those get very, very loud, very, very clear, and they're excellent speakers overall. Even their high RPM fans are drowned out by full volume, and they're actually really nice to listen to in a pinch. Of course, there's nothing that can compare to a good set of headphones, but with Lenovo here, they're promising us super linear speakers, whatever that means, 2 watts times 2. So we have 2 speakers down firing and out to the right, to the sides, and they have a a smart amplifier built in, which really helps to pump up that volume. So once the fans are spinning at max speeds, you can still have, potentially enough audio that fills your environment for a good, enjoyable experience without necessarily needing headphones. So I think just a shout out here to the speakers here. Well done, Lenovo. They're not THX tuned or anything. They're tuned actually by Harman Kardon, and we've got a smart amp on board. So overall, pretty good performance. They get loud enough. They're clear enough, not too tinny. They're doable and passable in this situation. So I just wanted to point that out, that this is a difference versus any typical laptop with speakers for gaming. Lenovo Vantage is the software that's used to administer this laptop, particularly with all things like switching the different performance modes. For example, you can click here and switch the different performance modes between balance, performance mode, and quiet. Do keep in mind that if you switch one of these on, as long as you have AI enabled, you can basically switch to all of these modes and AI will remain enabled. So be sure to untick that if you're going to switch different modes here. And from earlier reviews that I've looked at, Legion 5, the Legion 7i, basically this has remained unchanged. I do have a CPU overclock option here, but I wanted to point out here that this isn't working. I went into the BIOS and enabled CPU overclocking, but basically what happens is when I try to install this, it says that it needs to search for updates. It goes off to Lenovo, searches for those updates. Nothing ever shows up for the update, and I cannot get undervolting on this CPU to get enabled. This is the 13980HX from Intel. That's the Raptor 13th generation, Raptor Lake 13th generation. That means we can potentially unvolt or undervolt it because this is an unlocked CPU. But not being able to install the software, and I've messed around with it numerous times, try to get it to install, it just doesn't install for me. So you may run into a little bit of issues like this. Other than that, the GPU overclock seems to work pretty well. Once you accept the warning, the little bit of an overclock runs nicely on that 4090. Of course, you have some other features here that you can look through. You have different, light settings here. For example, 0 will turn all the way off, 6 will enable your RGB lighting, and all of these other things that I've looked at previously in my other videos. So if you do need to look for additional information, you can always reference that video. Otherwise, Lenovo Vantage keeps improving and they're tweaking it slightly every time, and I think it's getting better and better. It's one of the better softwares out there for controlling your laptop and manipulating all of the devices that come with it. So thank you very much for that, Lenovo. Keep up the good work, and we hope to see much more improvements in the coming years and iterations. So after all of that, let's conclude on what I think the verdict is on this particular laptop. This particular laptop, being the Legion 9i, does set a new bar. I think it does a lot of things really, really well. The display is absolutely fantastic. The body is thin and light. The materials are world class here with the forged carbon. The RGB lighting is on point. It's bright. There's 6 levels of adjustment there. The keyboard is true classical keyboard from Lenovo. You can't really fault it or go wrong with that. And in addition, I think the nice thing about it is it delivers on the performance. If you equip it with the 4080 or the 4090, it promises 175 watts of max TGP, and it delivers. Now, there is a debate. I guess it could be debated that, despite the gimmick of the liquid sealed cooling in this particular device, it still gets quite hot. But if you're gaming on a table, it's doable, it's serviceable. I would say it does get a little bit warm on the keyboard deck, but nothing, far cry from a few years ago when it would get so hot that you would start to singe your fingertips. I've played on this device for hours on end, and I did not have any of that experience. Yes, it's warm. Yes, you notice it when you place your palm. In fact, it's warm here. It's warm here. It's kind of warm all around. Check out my dedicated video on the thermals and fan noise on this particular laptop to see the actual details of what I tested and what I saw with extensive gameplay and with benchmarking using Furmark. But the essentials are done so well here. It's loaded with ports. We've got the lights on the back, back again, and we've got nice placement of ports as well. The size is fantastic. It's a little bit deeper generally than a 16-inch standard laptop, but it's not a problem fitting it into a standard 16 or 17-inch backpack for that as well. At 5.4546 pounds, it's not going to break your back either, and it has all of the performance that you need. This display, I cannot keep going on and on about this display, but it gives you all of the gaming chops, the content creator chops, the video and photography editor chops, as well as entertainment on the go. You're going to love this. It's a blast. And the speakers are very loud too, considering that this is only a 2-speaker setup. But whatever Lenovo has managed to do here, it's actually pretty fantastic, and it works really, really well. It's quite loud, akin to what I saw with the THX tuned speakers from the Razer Blade series. So overall, the only caveat here is the price, and I've already seen this, discounted. So if you factor that in, it's a little bit easier to swallow that pill. But at $6,000 as configured for this laptop configuration, which includes the RTX 4090, a 2 terabyte SSD, which is 1 terabyte SSDs from Samsung in a RAID 0 array, and 32 gigabytes of 5600 megahertz mega transfers per second, DDR5 RAM. So with all of that combined, we're looking at a sticker price of nearly $6,000 Canadian. But I've seen it just today actually, and yesterday I saw that Lenovo's running a sale on this on their website, something in the around figure of $650 to $700 off with the same configuration. So if you keep an eye out for deals, and I think going into the holiday season, they're trying to get the first catch of early buyers, but there will be sales on this. And if you wait a few more months, and when Lenovo's entering clearance, I think you're going to be able to pick up an absolutely killer gaming machine, and a machine that's going to last for years to come. And anything you can basically throw at, you'll be able to run. Keep in mind, all of the performance testing I did with my game benchmarks was done at the native 3.2K by 2K resolution, and to be able to run all of those nearly at 60 FPS with DLSS and frame generation enabled where available, hey, what more can you ask for? And I've demonstrated that with Masters of Lies of P, for example, we were able to get triple-digit frame rates without even using NVIDIA's DLSS. And if you enable that, you're nearly maxing out the refresh rate of this display. So overall, an absolutely fantastic setup. I absolutely love it. This is my favorite laptop of the year, aside from the price, of course. But I think the size and the factor, everything here just works so well. The soft touch materials here, the feel of the keys, they just feel like premium. I don't know what they've done here. Maybe these are double PBT. I don't know. But there's a fingerprint sensor in here, so we've got a little bit of biometric action on board. Lenovo Vantage is getting better. The Lenovo AI engine is getting much better. If you run it in balance mode with the AI engine enabled, you can get some excellent performance out of this without really having to do much, and just leave it there and forget it. You never need to bother with fan curves and all of these things. We're getting to that point where it's no longer going to be necessary at all, and I'm waiting for that day where we can just open up the device, run whichever workload, and the AI inside the device just decides how to run it and how to manage thermals, battery life, power, and all of those things. So that said, an excellent review. I think an excellent product from Lenovo. I'm very happy to see the Line I. I'm looking forward to the next iteration. Maybe they can improve on the cooling solution that they've provided here. And I think that's my take on this particular laptop. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you like my content, please share it across your social media channels to help grow this channel. All of this comes out of my personal pocketbook, so I would appreciate a like, a subscribe, and a share across your social media networks. And of course, I've also set up a separate channel here that's sister channel, which is called Burnt Out Gaming. Do go and subscribe. I'll leave the description or link in the description below. I'll be doing almost nightly gameplays there, reviews, overviews, new games, series of games that I really enjoy playing, and just to give you guys a little bit more exposure. And those gameplays are done either on my desktops or on these particular laptops as I get them in for review. So thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.